What if I told you that McLaren could be sabotaging, even indirectly, the chances of its own star driver to favor his teammate? What would you think if the fight for the World Championship was being manipulated from within the team itself? The Mexican Grand Prix not only marked a critical turn in Oscar Piastri's season, but also exposed what could be considered one of the most sensitive episodes in McLaren's recent history. What was initially interpreted as a poor qualifying or a failed weekend quickly transformed into a technical crisis with implications that went far beyond on-track performance. It was there, at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, where McLaren was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth that until then had been ignored or underestimated. Something was not working correctly with Oscar Piastri's MCL 39, and it was not a driver problem. The weekend began with confusing signs. While Lando Norris looked competitive from the first free practice sessions, Piastri seemed to be fighting against his own car. Qualifying was the first blow. He finished 7th, 6/10 of a second behind his teammate, who took pole position. This difference, unusual and large between two identical cars, was the trigger that led the engineers to begin an in-depth technical review of the telemetry data. What they found was more than worrying. The figures showed a severe loss of grip on the front axle of Piastri's car, especially in the specific conditions of the Mexican circuit: high altitude, low atmospheric pressure, and a track with minimal levels of grip. According to the analysis, the Australians' front tires did not reach their optimal temperature at the key moment of each lap, causing understeer when entering corners and oversteering when exiting. A cocktail that destroyed the balance of the car and, even worse, undermined the driver's confidence. Turn 1 was the best example of this. Piastri lost about 0.25 seconds to Norris in that first sector alone. The telemetry indicated that he braked before his partner, which was unusual. That difference, although small in time, is enormous in sensations. It reveals that the driver does not trust the stability of the car under braking load. And that type of mistrust in Formula One is lethal because it affects every decision, every braking point, every attempt to seek the limits of the car. Later on in the return, the situation did not improve. In the final corner, a key point for achieving good speed on the main straight, Piastri suffered a combined loss. The car understeered on entry and then, trying to make up time, oversteered on exit. The result was overheating of the rear tires, premature degradation, and loss of traction. All of this was recorded with surgical precision in the telemetry. It was, in Andrea Stella's own words, a technical scenario that completely compromised Oscar's ability to extract maximum performance from the car. These conditions, while explaining the poor performance, opened up a deeper and more alarming question. Why was only Piastri's car behaving that way? Why, under the same circumstances with the same aerodynamic package and setup, did one of the cars work perfectly and the other seem to be in constant struggle against its own chassis? Stella tried to put out the fire with diplomacy in her statements. We analyzed all aspects with Oscar: data, comments, and videos. We got valuable information about how to drive the car in low grip conditions. However, behind those words hid a growing tension. Because while the team was talking about learnings, Piastri and those around him were beginning to suspect that the recent changes to the car were favoring another driving style, one that coincided too much with that of his teammate. In Formula One, where differences are measured in thousandths of a second, the alignment between the technical development of the car and the characteristics of the driver is not a minor detail. It is, in fact, the difference between winning and losing. And in Mexico, McLaren discovered that alignment was breaking down, and it was only doing so on one side of the garage. The true root of the scandal within McLaren is not a broken part, nor a software error, nor even a failed strategy. It lies in something much deeper, more structural, and therefore more difficult to resolve without political consequences within the team. The technical direction of the development of the MCL 39 has been so specific, so focused on a specific driving style, that it has begun to exclude one of its two drivers. And that pilot is Oscar Piastri. From the outside, many might think that all Formula One cars are the same for both drivers. The reality, however, is much more complex. Over the course of a season, a car evolves with each update package, and that evolution is never neutral. Each modification, each new floor, each suspension adjustment or change in the engine map responds to a feedback model. Engineers develop the car based on the driver's style that offers the best results or that best communicates their sensations. In this case, that driver has been Lando Norris. The improvements introduced at the Austrian, Silverstone, and Belgian Grands Prix brought with them a subtle but decisive change in the car's dynamics. The MCL 39 began to show better rotation in the center of the curves and greater reactivity in the transition zones, but at the cost of increasing its sensitivity to pitching and longitudinal oscillation of the chassis during braking and acceleration. This requires a much more aggressive driving style, with continuous corrections and a great ability to attack apexes without compromising the stability of the car. That style fits perfectly with Lando Norris, who has built his career on the ability to push the car to the limit from the get-go, using the front axle as an attacking tool. Norris is fast when entering corners, he blindly trusts in the car's mechanical grip and has an almost instinctive intuition to play with controlled slides. This approach has undoubtedly been rewarded by McLaren's technical development in 2025. Oscar Piastri, on the other hand, has a completely different approach. Its style is more analytical, more progressive, based on the stability of the rear axle, the cleanliness of lines and the conservation of tires. A style that was perfectly effective during the first half of the season and that even allowed him to lead the championship. But with each new update, that approach began to clash with the MCL39's new identity. The car began to require a type of driving that was not only different from his own, but also directly penalized him. The problem here is not simply one of style. It is a technical incompatibility. Piastri needs a car that is predictable in braking, responds well in traction, and maintains a stable platform. But the evolved MCL39 offers you the opposite. A nervous, demanding car that requires constant adjustments mid-corner, something that not only hinders your pace but directly affects your confidence. And when a driver stops trusting his car, everything falls apart. Within the team, this imbalance has begun to generate tensions. Some members of Piastri's entourage, as well as external analysts, have already raised their voices suggesting that McLaren has fallen into the trap of developing a one-person car. The phrase that is repeated behind the scenes is clear. This car is no longer a McLaren for two drivers, it is a McLaren for Lando. Andrea Stella, team director, has tried to maintain diplomacy, ensuring that the goal is to build the best possible car for both of us. But that narrative is beginning to fail in the face of the results and telemetry. The data doesn't lie. Since the car began to favor Norris characteristics, Piastri has disappeared from the podiums. And the most worrying thing is that there are no signs that this trend is going to reverse. The situation is reminiscent of other historical moments in F1, where successful teams sacrifice technical neutrality in favor of their star driver. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it always leaves a human cost. In this case, that cost could be the loss of competitiveness of Oscar Piastri, a talent who proved capable of fighting for the title and who, however, today seems trapped in a car that no longer represents him. What is at stake is not just the 2025 season. It is the internal confidence of one of the most promising drivers of his generation. And in a category as ruthless as Formula One, the loss of that trust can mean the difference between a legendary race and a promise that was never fulfilled. Oscar Piastri is more than a number on the championship table. He is a carefully constructed world champion project, with an impeccable track record from the lower categories to the elite of Formula One. His emergence onto the grid was seen as a sign of generational change. Not only did he have the speed, he also had the strategic intelligence, the composure under pressure, and the maturity of someone who understands F1 as a game of precision. But none of those virtues can survive the technical isolation of driving a car that no longer responds to you. The human cost of this situation is invisible to those who only follow Sunday's results. But for those who know the inner workings of the teams, it is clear that Oscar Piastri is paying a price that does not appear in any contract. The psychological wear and tear of being surpassed by his own team, not due to a lack of talent, but due to a technical evolution that has stopped taking it into account. This not only generates frustration, it also erodes the relationship of trust between driver and team, one of the fundamental pillars in any high-performance structure. Piastri has not said so publicly. He is disciplined, politically correct, and knows that any inflammatory statement could turn against him. But the signs are there. His body language during the weekends, the lack of enthusiasm on the radio, the increasingly analytical and less competitive tone of his interviews. Everything indicates that he is processing a silent disappointment, that of seeing how a car in which he trusted and with which he led a world championship has now become a barrier. For McLaren, the situation is a minefield. They have two of the best talents on the grid, but the management of that talent has begun to tilt in a dangerous way. The technical evolution that has empowered Lando Norris, undoubtedly beneficial in the immediate, may end up costing them the long-term loyalty of a driver who, in other circumstances, could have been their champion. In modern Formula One, teams not only compete on the track, they also compete to retain talent. And when a pilot feels that his personal development is being sacrificed in favor of another, the consequences are not long in coming. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.